Let's look at it. Let's say I'm getting accused of being narcissistic. Let's look at whether I am. What about me is this way?
Mm-hmm.
What about me isn't this way? It's like a real sort of objective evaluation process. And then relative to each point, what do I actually feel about me being this way? Is this something that I want to maintain? Because you can make a conscious choice to be any way you want, you know. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes when you're in certain positions, you have to.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a really interesting documentary that was done on Michael Jordan. And I just absolutely loved it. I absolutely loved that documentary because...
Was it the series?
Yeah, what was it called, you guys?
There was a 7-part series.
Yes. Yeah,
it was a...
Come on, what was it called? Thank you. There was...
It was amazing.
Yeah. So there was a documentary that was done called The Last Dance on Michael Jordan that I thought was absolutely amazing because there's this part where you essentially saw it reflected from all the people on the team. Like, he was a total asshole.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually got emotional about the fact, right? But let's say you're getting that reflection. Let's say that's what people are saying. And it's creating that emotional reaction to me. That's this opportunity to be like, well, let me look at my relationship to this. Like, genuinely, do I yell at people? Yes or no? People perceive that to be, you know, not nice. Maybe I would drill down on like what it is specifically, because that's like a label. People are like, you're an asshole. Okay, well, what exactly is the behavior? Yeah. Okay, so like, let's say they're able to isolate it. Then you look at your relationship to that thing. Let's say people are like, well, you yell at people, even when they're feeling bad. Okay, well, let's look at my relationship to yelling at people even when they're feeling bad. Do I want to be this way?
Mm-hmm.
Do I not want to be this way? Also, the philosophical examination of that. Because it's easy for us, especially with our cultural programming, to be like, that's always a wrong. Is it? Is the question. So it's almost like this invitation to dive as deep as you can so that when you come out of it, it's no longer this weak point.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then maybe the exercise is, okay, I'm actually actively trying to change this about myself. And that's your new practice. Or it's, I'm actually going to stand by it. Mm-hmm. And so if I get confronted with this again, I'm going to look at somebody in the face and be like, and this is why I do it. And this is why it's staying.
It's like they shine a flashlight on an unconscious behavior. You bring it into consciousness and decide then consciously what you want to do with it.
Yes.
I think that's honestly...
That's really powerful.
That's an incredibly powerful technique to deal with, not just, I don't like the word criticism, but to deal with someone else's perception of your behavior. And I think if it was adopted by more people, I think the world would be a much, much better place. The Michael Jordan aspect of that is really interesting, I find, because they were also the winningest team in basketball history.
See, that's what I loved about it.
Right?
That's what I loved about it, because so many people are watching that, you know, with their cultural programming, watching him and the way he's behaving and going, my God, I liked him before. I don't really like this, you know? Oh, I didn't know he was such an asshole. Somebody like me who comes from professional sports is like, fuck yeah, be that way.
Right. It's interesting.
Be that way. That's what you should sign up for if you're on that team, you know? And that's the thing, like, there's different rules. There needs to be more flexibility around this. There's different rules for different things. Mm-hmm. We've even got this with the military right now. I don't know if you've heard about this, but like the military is getting huge backlash right now for how violent their trainings are.
They're the military.
Exactly. Exactly. So that's what I'm saying. Like by entering into a specific arena, you are agreeing to specific rules.
Yeah.
And basically, one of the problems with modern society is they're looking to demolish all those rules.
And that goes back to the challenging of authority and the structures, not just of knowledge, but also of sort of the arena of space that you agree and consent to be inside a certain set of rules and values. And
I'm all for consent. I'm like, but you got to decide whether you belong in that arena.
Yeah, right. For sure.
If you're going to sign up for that arena, you are signing up for certain things.
Well, and if you want to be on the winningest basketball team in the world, in the history, along with the greatest players that have ever played the game.
Get ready for pressure every single day.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's almost an expectation. People are going to yell at you and be an asshole to you.
Well, that's the thing. It's what you take on, right? It's the sacrifices that you understand you're about to make when you join these professional sports or the military. It's like, of course, if it was easy, then everybody would be a professional athlete. Well, everybody would be, you know, in the Navy SEALs and doing that. Like, there is a reason why it's not for everyone. But especially these days, and it's been a little bit triggering for me in moments, like this whole woke culture.
Ooh, let's talk about that. Okay.
Like,
we're just going to dive right in.
Oh, wow.
But, you know, it's funny. It's something that we talked last night as well at dinner about, that whole thing about gymnastics that I told you, right? How all of a sudden out of nowhere, this gymnast that I was on a team with has come out and gone public into all the news, the mainstream media and the news outlets saying how our coach was abusive. This was too much. Like, we were not treated as human beings. Let's all gaslight this coach and get her out of Gymnastics Federation.
Gymnastics Canada got put on a cross, and the Canadian media, which is the darlings to the woke culture,
they
just
loved it.
printed and printed as much as they could.
Yeah, and now they're trying to gather all these people to come out. And then, as I was saying, I was like, I don't think I would ever come out and say, because I know I was around that. I was seeing
they were
that
her teammates.
Abuse, as they labeled it, because it was really difficult training. Like, you're talking about the Navy SEALs. It's like, of course you're going to be yelled at and put through the most difficult times. And that is how our coach did position it. Yeah.
Do you feel like you signed up for that?
Yes.
That's the difference. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of these people that are coming forward right now were forced in some way into these positions, whether it's by a parent who wants them to be in a sport. I've watched this with other sports before, and I've tried to figure out what the difference is between those who are like you, who are like, what the hell are you doing? Like, this is what I signed up for, and people who are like, this is all abuse, and this is all messed up. And the variable that I have found is that there's almost always some sensation that as a child they were forced to do something they didn't want to do. And usually it's by parents, actually. And the scapegoat is the coach. I mean, sometimes there's serious sexual abuse. We're not talking about that. But like, let's say there's not serious sexual abuse. It's oftentimes the coach becomes the scapegoat for feeling pressured into a sport by the family. So you've got because like some of these children, especially when it comes, I don't know how it is with rhythmic gymnastics, but like, what do they call it with the other type of gymnastics?
Artistic gymnastics.
Yeah.
They call it,
With that, it's like these girls are being forced into this at 2, 3, 4. Do you really think that most of these children are waking up being like, I want to be an Olympic athlete? No, most of it is their parents.
Yeah, putting them in the program.
Well, that is the same in rhythmic gymnastics too, especially when you're looking at like the Eastern European side. Like, there's like gymnasts in Russia that are 2, 3 years old that are taken from their families and put into this thing and like stretched in crazy ways.
So then
it
is abuse.
Yeah.
So then it's abuse.
That's interesting. But did you ever have a time when, like, where you felt that it was too much and you wanted?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So would that be then unconsensual at that point?
Yeah. For me, it got to a point, I think...
well, when you were injured, right?
When I was injured and I was saying I was under contract and I was forced to compete, I had to be taking like pills of morphine to get through the pain in competitions because my back was... Literally, they took a MRI of my back when I was 16 years old and they said I had the back of a 60-year-old woman. My spines were the same. That's how much damage I had. And I was forced to go through these difficult trainings and so to go through that pain. And I think it got to a point where I felt like I was forced to do something against my will because I was contractually obliged to do this and supporting my family at the same time. So there was like a deeper, obligation to it. And it drove me to a dark place. It drove me into like point of depression and hating it all and just like wanting to, and at that time too, I think at the age of 17, wanting to be that rebellious, fuck this, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, and it did.
But I think sometimes as well, I think you became something after and you used that trauma and that suffering to become something more in your life. I find that there could be a secondary perspective to the idea of where this all comes from. I think a lot of the people that come back out at the same time, it could also be because they had parents that forced them in, but it could also be because then they never actually were given what they were promised by suffering through it, and their life turned out to...
This is going to take us down the wormhole of wokeism.
Okay, because it's interesting, because I find the gymnast that came out in Canada, I mean, it's not like she was like... She had no spotlight going back to wanting to be seen, wanting to be heard, wanting to be validated. She went through it all to find at the end of the golden path she was told she was walking down.
This is totally something else.
There was no happiness. There was no joy. And all of a sudden, what I thought was interesting, and again, I don't know her. I don't know her life or her story, but all of a sudden she was put on the cover of magazines and put on the cover of news. And all of a sudden you look at her social media and all it is all of the pictures of her on the covers of all these articles. And you're like, is there a connection between now getting some kind of validation that she never received because she didn't ever actually...
Yes, and it's just equally as profitable for the magazines.
Right. Right. Well, of course, the media loves it.
We're going to swim down the wormhole now. Ready? Wokeism.
Oh, my goodness.
Welcome. Okay. So this woke culture that is coming up, especially in the Western world, is an absolute toxicity. It has its roots in the deep wounding that occurred with this generation. We're talking millennials and Gen Zs, right? But especially millennials are the ones that started this one.
Mm-hmm.
Wokeism is essentially when you weaponize resentment. And resentment is all about unfairness. This generation feels like they were more unfairly led and unfairly treated, especially by authority, than any other culture or any other, generation that I've seen. There's more animosity between the millennial generation and the boomers than I've seen between a generation ever. Ever. So here you have a generation. We have to look back into the origins of this generation to understand this one.
Right.
Here you have a generation who were sold an idea. That's why I loved what you said earlier. They were sold the idea that if you go to school, if you do these things, then you get a job like this. Mm-hmm. Then it means, right, you get the family, you get the fairy tale romance, you see? So they were sold on this idea, and what happened is none of it came to be. In fact, they were kicked into the workforce exactly when 2008 happened. So there was a market crash the second that they were put in the workforce. Then you've got the boomer generation, which are largely in control of the market, and in terms of the residential market, raising prices to such a degree that now they're priced out of the market. You can't buy a house anymore.
Yeah.
So they can't get a good job, no matter how much debt they're in because of going to school and following rules. That's right. Also, relationships. You sold me on the idea that relationships were going to work out. Look at all the Disney movies you sat me in front of when I was a kid. This is not how it's working.
Rom-coms aren't a thing in life.
So what you notice is that they were sold on this idea that if they just put in all the time, work, energy, all the pain, right? If they put in all the pain, it would equal these results. And it did not happen. And we were already dealing with a crisis with this before the pandemic. You have a twice wounded generation. All right. So with a generation it's destroyed. I'm going to be honest with you. The millennial generation is demolished. And really, the only individuals within this generation that are finding genuine success in worldly terms are the ones who are going so far outside the box that, it's not something that most people can replicate.
Yeah.
They're like the one-offs, you'd say it, right?
Like the self-employed, the ones that broke the paradigm, moved away.
You guys.
Yourself too included.
Me.
Yeah.
Elon Musk. It's these people who are like, all right, well, none of that is working, so I'm just going to break the entire formula itself.
Yes.
But the question is, like, how many people honestly have it within themselves to do those types of things, right? Not everyone. Not everyone. So there's no track to success anymore within society for this generation. And because of it, it is a truly resentful, distrustful, violently angry generation who has needs, nonetheless has these needs. Now, what are they going to do with these needs? The only thing that they can do. Right now, the only thing they can do with that extreme resentment that they have is to try to rip down authority structures, because authority is what hurt them. Authority is the one that said, here, go through all this pain, I'll give you the cookie, psych.